Stop for a moment and understand this, without filtering it through doubt or habit. Because what is happening now is not a continuation of what your life has been. It is a reset point that interrupts the pattern you have been moving in. And that interruption is not symbolic, it is functional. It changes direction, it changes focus, and it changes what is required from you starting now. Not tomorrow, not later, but from this exact point forward, where awareness meets decision. You have felt the build-up, not as something obvious, but as a quiet accumulation of moments that no longer fit, reactions that no longer feel right, environments that no longer hold you the same way. And that is not because everything around you suddenly changed. It is because you have reached the limit of what that version of your life could contain. And once that limit is reached, continuation is no longer alignment, it becomes repetition. And repetition is not where you are meant to stay. This wasn't random, it was selection. A reset does not mean everything disappears. It means everything is reevaluated against a different standard. And that standard is not external. It is internal alignment with what God has already placed in you, which means that what remains in your life after this point will not be based on what you are used to, but on what matches who you are now. And that shift is what you are stepping into. You are not starting over. You are starting correctly. There is a difference between change that you initiate and change that is initiated in you. And what is happening here is not something you decided. It is something that has been activated because you have reached a level where continuing the same way would only create delay. And delay at this stage is not neutral. It is misalignment. And misalignment is what this reset is correcting. You weren't rejected. You were redirected. The phrase meet God is not about distance or location. It is about alignment. It is about reaching a point where what you think, what you do, and what you recognize are no longer in conflict, where you are no longer divided between what you know is right and what you actually do. Because that division is what has been holding you in place, and this reset removes that division. You are not being asked to find something new. You are being required to align with what has already been placed in you. And that alignment is not built through long preparation. It is established through immediate correction, through decisions that reflect clarity instead of habit, through actions that match awareness instead of comfort. And that is why this moment feels different, because it does not invite delay. It requires response. This wasn't random. It was selection. You may notice that certain things are overly losing their hold on you, not because you are forcing yourself to let go, but because they no longer match the level you are stepping into. And that is how resets work at this level. They do not require you to remove everything manually. They change your position so that what does not align becomes easier to release naturally. You are not forcing change. You are entering alignment. And alignment simplifies what used to feel complicated, because it removes the need to negotiate with yourself. It removes the need to justify delay. It removes the need to explain why you are not moving, because movement becomes the default when clarity is present. You weren't abandoned. You were prepared. Everything that led up to this point, every delay, every shift, every moment where things did not move the way you expected, was not wasted. It was building awareness. It was refining your ability to recognize what is aligned and what is not. And now that that awareness is clear, the next phase does not require more learning. It requires execution. You already know what does not belong. You already know what needs to change. You already know where you have been delaying. And that is why this reset is direct. Because you are no longer at a stage where you need to discover. You are at the stage where you need to act. This wasn't random. It was selection. The idea of tonight is not about a specific hour. It is about immediacy. It is about the removal of distance between knowing and doing. Because the longer that distance exists, the more it creates patterns that keep you in place. And this reset collapses that distance. It brings awareness and action into the same point. You are not waiting anymore. You are responding. And that response is what defines what this reset becomes. Because a reset without action is just recognition. But a reset with action becomes transformation. And transformation is what you are being moved into, not gradually, not eventually, but directly. You weren't reacting. You were called. And now you are being required to answer. Because what is chosen does not stay in awareness without movement. It converts awareness into action, and action into alignment, and alignment into direction. And that direction is already clear enough for you to step into without hesitation. You are not guessing. You are recognizing. And recognition at this level leaves no room for delay. This wasn't random. It was selection. Everything after this point becomes simpler, not easier in the way you might expect, but clearer. Because once you remove what does not align, what remains is direct. And direct movement does not require overthinking. It requires consistency. It requires you to stay in the same state of alignment across different situations, different decisions, different moments. You are not being asked to do something impossible. You are being asked to do something exact. An exact action is what defines this phase. You are chosen. And what is chosen does not continue the same way after awareness reaches this level. It resets, and then it moves immediately. And once this reset is recognized, the part that truly determines everything begins. Because a reset is not defined by the moment you become aware of it. It is defined by what you do immediately after. And this is where the separation becomes absolute. Because many will feel something shift. Many will sense that something is changing. But they will still try to carry all patterns into a new phase. They will try to adjust instead of replace. They will try to negotiate instead of commit. And that is where the reset fails to complete. Not because it was not real, but because it was not followed through. You are not in that position. Because what you are experiencing is not just awareness. It is clarity that removes the ability to pretend you do not know what needs to happen next. And that clarity is not something you can ignore without feeling immediate resistance, immediate discomfort, immediate misalignment. Because once a reset reaches this level, delay is no longer passive. It becomes active contradiction to what has already been established inside you. This wasn't random. It was selection. You may feel a narrowing now, not as pressure from outside, but as a tightening of options internally, where choices that once felt open no longer feel available, where certain paths no longer feel like real options, even if they are still physically possible. And that narrowing is not limitation, it is precision. It is the removal of unnecessary directions so that movement becomes direct instead of scattered. You are not losing options. You are losing distraction. And once distraction is removed, what remains is not confusion, it is direction. But direction at this level requires immediate alignment, not gradual adjustment. Because you are no longer in a phase where you are exploring. You are in a phase where you are executing. You weren't rejected. You were redirected. And now that redirection has reached clarity, the only thing that remains is the response. not in a general sense, not in a distant plan, but in exact actions that match what you already recognize. And that is why this moment feels different from previous ones, because before, you could still delay without fully feeling the cost. But now the cost is immediate. It is felt as misalignment the moment you hesitate. You're not being pushed randomly. You are being aligned precisely. And precision removes flexibility in the way most people are used to, because it does not allow you to drift between options. It requires you to stand in one direction and move forward without dividing your attention. This wasn't random. It was selection. There's something else that becomes clear here, and it is that meeting God, in the way this message defines it, is not about reaching outward. It is about eliminating everything that separates you from alignment. Because what you are aligning with is not external distance, it is internal order. It is the point where what you know, what you choose, and what you do are no longer in conflict. And that state cannot be approached while holding on to patterns that contradict it. So what is happening now is not an addition. It is a removal. A removal of hesitation. A removal of negotiation. A removal of delay. And once those are removed, alignment becomes immediate. Not something you build over time, but something you step into directly. Because nothing is left to block it. You weren't abandoned. You were positioned. And position at this level is not about where you are physically. It is about the state you operate from consistently. Because consistency is what stabilizes the reset, not intensity, not one strong decision, but the continuation of that decision across multiple moments without breaking alignment. You have already entered the reset. Now you are stabilizing it. And stabilization requires awareness in every decision that follows, because every moment now becomes either reinforcement of alignment or a return to patterns you have already outgrown. And the difference is no longer subtle to you. It is immediate. It is clear. It is something you recognize the moment it happens. This wasn't random. It was selection. You are no longer in a cycle. You are in a direction. And direction does not repeat. It progresses. It moves forward without returning to previous states, unless you actively choose to step back into them. And that choice is now visible to you in a way it never was before, which means you are no longer acting unconsciously. You are acting with awareness of consequence in real time. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are being required to be aligned. And alignment is not about doing everything correctly. It is about not contradicting what you already know. It is about not delaying what is already clear. It is about not returning to what you have already recognized as misaligned. That is the standard now. You weren't reacting. You were called. And now you are responding continuously, not once, not occasionally, but as a consistent state. Because this reset is not a moment, it is a transition into a different way of operating. One that does not allow unconscious repetition. One that does not allow passive delay. One that does not allow division between awareness and action. You are chosen. And what is chosen does not recognize a reset and then return to the same structure. It recognizes, it aligns, and it continues without returning to what has already been removed. Because that version of you no longer exists. And now, everything that follows will reflect that.